Drag Week is an event that Hot Rod Magazine puts on. It's 4 different tracks in 5 days. So you show up to the first track, you're allowed to carry the gear that you need to run your car, either in the car, on the car, or in a trailer. You are not allowed to bring a spare engine, but you can bring spare parts as needed. When you get to the track and you run a time that you're happy with, you can turn in your time slip and they give you a route to follow to go to the next track. You're not allowed to follow the shortest route to the next track. You have to follow their pre-planned route, which brings you through, some neat parts of rural America that you normally wouldn't see. And throughout the week, you are kind of on this journey that you are racing your car and driving around the country and just having a great time. So in order to win Drag Week, you must first complete it. And if you do complete it and you turn in your 5 time slips and you have the fastest average of the week in your class, you're the winner.
Looking back at last year, it's hard for me I can't believe the car made it. Like it made it through 5 days of absolute torture. And I remember looking at the dash and just being like, this car's just not gonna make it to day 5. It's not gonna happen. But it did. And it was an incredible experience. I loved the event. I loved the people. I loved everything about the event. And after we finished that week, I was like, I wanna come back to this. I wanna do this event for as long as I can. So of course, going into this year, I already knew what to expect. I felt more comfortable because we looked at the area where we were gonna be and it didn't have the crazy elevation changes. We didn't have these mountains where you had to drive, uphill for an hour straight or downhill for an hour straight and your brakes are hitting you and the whole deal. So I felt a lot better about it going into this year. We made some pretty big changes this year. Right off the first day, we took the hood off. It makes such a big difference in engine bay temperatures that we felt we didn't want to risk it. The next major thing, which turned out to be like a huge difference, was the converter. The guys over at Pro Torque helped us with a lockup converter, which a lockup is something that we already were planning on doing because it's going to help us going down the track. But this year, we were in a hurry to get it done before Drag Week to make sure that we had it for drivability purposes, because now we could lock up the converter once the car's at speed, which is going to greatly reduce transmission temperatures. I mean, everything about the car worked better once that converter was locked up.
This year we brought a second car also. So we brought my MK5 and my technician, Chris, the guy that, I'll build the engines for the MK4 and Chris will bolt the car together. So it's kind of his baby. Last year he had to watch from the sidelines and this year he got to go be in Drag Week with the MK5, which was pretty cool.
So Sunday we pull in and we already know that the MK4 has a guaranteed spot because we ran in the event last year, but we were hoping that the MK5 would make it in. They always say waiting is the hardest part, and it's true. So after Gio's car had made it through the tech inspection, I had to start the scramble of going to check what spot I am on the wait list and how are they going to contact me if I know that I got in, and so on and so forth. Like, it's nerve-wracking, and you just hope you get in because it's an awesome event, and we brought the car on the hopes that they would let us in, and about 4 o'clock that day they made the announcement that if you're there, you're in. So that was a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. We had just put a new turbo on the car before the event. We had no idea what it was going to do, so getting to run the test and tune was a pretty big deal so that we knew kind of how the week would play out.
The first run I was too hot and it spun the tires, and the second run I was under, so it was just slow to the 8th, and I asked you to just run to the 8th. That was our test passes, and I wasn't really uncomfortable with that. The surface looked okay. I figured I'll just get a run together tomorrow.
Monday morning, we get to the track. The forecast was shaky. However, we didn't expect rain till the afternoon. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. I mean, we got to the driver's meeting, and by the end of the driver's meeting, it was already pouring, and it was enough that it was a good 2 to 3 hours before we actually got to get on track. And by then, it's almost 12, 1 o'clock. Sun's hit the track. It's just really, really bad. And at that point, they announced that we're only going to have one pass. That's it. So there's only one opportunity, and after that we got to get on the road because they expected even more rain.
Capable of 690s. Told me yesterday they've learned their licks on drag week. Oh, no traction out of the hole for Gio with the Supra. So 11:01.3 at 121.75 for Matt Jones, 9:07.8 at 185.74.
Unfortunately, we had to turn in a 907 because within 10 feet of me letting go of the button, the car spun. I tried to get back into it, but I was late to pedal it. The car only had one nitrous kit in it, and it was kind of lazy to come back into power, and the run's over. It went 907 at 185 miles per hour. And we couldn't turn in another time, so that's the only time that we had to turn in. We had to get on the road. So it was a very frustrating start to drag week. Just obviously last year we had to turn in a 9-second time slip and it ruined our week. We chased the rest of the way.
When we spun on Monday, I was pretty disappointed. All the cars that were going to race were sitting in the staging lanes getting rained on. And then it started to rain again. So there was a good amount of water in the car, and you can only shake so much of it out while the car is stationary. So there were cars that were leaving the starting line and water was coming out of the rockers and getting on the tires and they were spinning. I didn't feel very confident at that point. I know that I had put more power somewhere in the middle of where it spun the day before and where it didn't have enough power to get in the starting line. And I felt like that was gonna work out for me, and the track was in pretty good prep. So I thought that I had a run, but I would say that because of the water getting on the track, falling out of the car, it knocked the tires loose, and we had to turn in a 9.0 because of the weather delay. There wasn't time to make a second run, so we had to just move to the next track, which was Cecil.
I knew I had one shot, so I didn't worry about reaction time. I just wanted to make the best run that I could.
Brand new Supra. At 130 miles an hour. Big mile an hour. Yeah, man.
We left in second gear because we didn't know if the track was going to handle the gear ratio of first gear in that car. So I left in second. It was a good, clean pass. I didn't know what to expect for a time. I knew that the car was fast on Sunday because it did 130 miles an hour. So I anxiously rolled up to the time shack, grabbed the time slip of my basically one chance run, and it was a 1097. So we're already starting the week off good for that 10-second average.
We went from Virginia to Delaware. Cecil County, from what I understand, is the oldest track in the nation. I had never been there before. I had already heard a little bit about the track. I know it's a fast track, but I did hear that the shutdown is pretty, it gets pretty sketchy with a fast car. So I had that thought in the back of my head, but overall, I looked at the facility, everything looked fine, and the car made it there, very good. We got up early that morning and everything was fine, so I felt pretty confident.
And it was pretty early in the day and there wasn't a lot of rubber, so they were spraying VHT, but they were spraying it on a pretty thin surface, and they had sprayed right before we came up. And the tires came loose. I actually didn't make changes to go back and run it again because The track operator saw what had happened and engaged in the problem and said, hey man, it'll be better when you come back up. So they were working to get rubber on the track and get it sticky, and he was right. You know, he must have known the car, because he kind of catered to the opportunity we needed, and it worked out because we ran a 7.4 on our next pass, and we packed up and got ready to get on the road.
You don't have all day. You can't just stay at the track till 3 o'clock, because every drive, even if it's only 200 miles, it's not like 200 miles in a Camry, and it's not 200 miles going straight. They make you, again, go through a lot of different roads that are very, very slow. They make you stop at different checkpoints, and every time you stop at a checkpoint, you're getting out, you're taking pictures, you're talking to everyone there, you're letting everyone know how the drive went. There's people at the checkpoints that are just drag week fanatics talking to everyone. So every single checkpoint takes 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And by the time you get to where you're going, a 200-mile trip might take you 6 to 8 hours.
If I could turn in 7.4, 7.5 time slips and just have the car soft enough to get moving off the starting line quickly without spinning, I would be content with that. That's kind of what I wanted to do throughout the week. When we turned in the 7.4 at Cecil, I was feeling pretty good. I was ready to just move to the next track and try to do the same thing again.
We had put pump gas in the car before, and it typically runs on race gas. So the first run, the car was a little unhappy just because it didn't have the octane that it wanted. So we ended up putting some MS-109 back in it to raise the octane level back up. So my first run was not really thrown away, but it wasn't what we wanted. So my first run, it went 11:01 at 127, and I was a little bummed out that the mile an hour was down. Like, it had done 130 miles an hour the two days before that, so I was like, what's going on? So I'm checking the data log, and I'm seeing that it's pulling timing. It's got high IATs. I might have sold myself short on this one now, because I've done one run, and I'm in the sealed hood class, so I can't open the hood, I can't cool the car off. All I can do is run it again and try to 60 foot harder to make up for the time. So I get back in the lanes to basically hot lap it as fast as I could, in hopes that I could get the 60 foot down. It does an 11:02 still at 127 miles an hour. So I was able to learn from that if the car's hot, it's gonna go 127 miles an hour. And the fact that it went 11:01 and then 11:02, I'm pretty confident that I can now predict the time that it's gonna run based off of the IAT.
So now we're pulling up to Atco, which is pretty cool for me. I haven't been there in over 15 years. John and I had taken the Mustang and raced it there a couple times. And I believe that I'd actually had made passes in the Mustang at Atco before. So I remembered that they had they have a bar at the track, and you know, just it's another old historic racetrack. So surface looks pretty good. We're gonna go ahead and make a run. It wasn't so early in the day. It was around 9 o'clock because after Gio had done his burnout, they stopped us for a moment of silence because it's 9/11. So, you know, you go back through that memory of 9/11 happening, and then it's time to go back racing. So that was kind of a somber feeling in the midst of all this excitement. It is a very somber feeling in the midst of all that excitement because that was a huge tragedy for America. So work through that, refocus. What are the temperatures like? Because now we have to back up and do a second burnout.
I always obviously want to go faster, but it was a safe approach to make the first pass just be identical. So we made no changes, and the car worked about the same. It cut a slightly worse 60 foot, so it went a 753 at 189. At that point, it was really early. We still had plenty of time. However, it was one of the longest drives that we were going to have to do from ATCO to Mechanicsville, which is where Maryland International Raceway was. And we were in a good position to just pack up and go. And every single time I'm going to be a little bit greedy. I'm going to try to push for a little bit more and see if we can get more out of it, just because I know the car can go so much faster. But you have to make these decisions during drag week that it's not, you don't go there to run your best time. You go there to try to finish the week and just try to put together some runs. They might not be the runs that you want, but as long as they're good enough to turn in a decent time slip, you really have to make that a priority over running a really fast time.
The track's looking pretty good, so I decide we're gonna go for a first gear launch. We're gonna try to make a pass. So I foot brake it. I'm paying attention. I'm at 2,300 RPM, and I'm like, I've raced this car before, so I know the sounds that the car makes when it's ready to launch, and I'm at 2,300 RPM, and I can hear it's not ready yet. It'll take more. So I get it to 2,500. It'll take a little bit more. Push it to 26, and right at 26, you can start to hear the brakes kind of groan, and you hear the chassis just make these sounds. And as soon as you hear the sounds, you know it's ready to launch.
And Dave Fontaine, 10:05.5. People will do putting the short bed conversion on and shorten up the frame and everything. They actually did it on an episode of Hot Rod Garage. But the hot thing now is to leave the well. 128.73 for Chris Schneider in the Supra.
I'm excited. I'm smiling in the car. I'm saying, go baby, go. Like, this is gonna be a pass. So I make it through the traps, and I'm excited, and all of a sudden my phone just starts blowing up, and I'm getting text messages from my dad and my friends that are watching us on the live stream, and they're all like, awesome job, like, that's a great pass. And I'm just sitting in the car like, I don't know how fast I went yet. So I finally roll up to the time shack, and I get the time slip, and it's a 1087 at 128. So it's the fastest pass that the car has gone so far. So I'm ecstatic because now I've had a 1097, an 1101, and a 1087, which brings me back into the 10-second average.
One of the other racers that was competing in our class came over to ask some questions about the car, and in talking to him, he mentioned that the carbon doors aren't legal for the modified Power Addict class. We've raced the car exactly the same way now for a couple of years now. It has a carbon hatch, it has carbon doors, which, once you look at the car, is very obvious. I mean, you open the door, you can see that it's carbon. At that point, the next morning, quickly we decided to talk to Keith. Jay went over to him, and all we did was we ended up moving classes over to the Unlimited class, which was a way faster class. That's where Tom Bailey is. I mean, he went 599. that's obviously the most extreme of drag week, which we have no business being a part of. But now for next year, we know we'll just go with the factory doors. It's not going to be a big deal.
I wish I would have just, taken the time to read the rules, to follow the rules, because it really changed the trajectory. Because that moment we had moved on from trying to win drag week to, well, now we're just going to experience drag week, which wasn't a horrible thing at all, but wasn't what we intended to do. We'd gone to win, and we had put ourselves in a position that we were not going to be able to win. So getting to MIR was pretty exciting for me because I have a lot of confidence in that track. It's familiar. You've been there a bunch of times. You kind of know what to expect. I didn't think Jason Miller would be working because it looks as if he's a freelance. He'll go work for other tracks. So I didn't know that he was going to come work for Hot Rod Magazine that day or for MIR. But as soon as I heard that he was there doing the prep, then I felt like, okay, well, we can go ahead and put a run together. It's like that part in Pulp Fiction where they say, oh, we're sending the wolf. I mean, between Jason Miller and Wade at Orlando, like those guys you can count on, you're going to have a track to really put a number together. So I wasn't going to be entirely greedy. I just took one of our 6-second data sets, put it in the car, and pulled some timing out for the first, couple seconds. And we were going to let it ride. I was happy about it because, you have a reputation. The car has a reputation on the internet of being a 6-second car, but really the car's only as fast as its last pass. So, having the opportunity to go fast was pretty cool. And Gio came back around and Gio said, well, now that we've had this class change, we're not going to be able to win. So why don't we just go ahead and run a number? I'm going to really try to get after it. And if it sticks, we'll go fast. If it doesn't stick, we'll move on to the next track. And him and I agreed that would be our move. When we're on the trans brake, we have about 20 pounds of boost and about 5,000 RPM. The nitrous kit 1 is on, and then as you let go of the trans brake, the nitrous kit 1 momentarily turns off and then turns back on until around 28 pounds of boost to try to get the turbocharger spooled. It's a big turbocharger. It's an 88 millimeter, so it has a lot of momentum, and when it comes up into boost, it normally swings into the 60-pound range. So as the turbocharger is swinging past 60 pounds of boost, I have the ignition timing pulled way down to try to help maintain traction. So on a great surface, you may have 10 or 11 degrees of timing through there with our car. But in this case, because we don't have ideal surfaces, we're going to go ahead and use 2 or 3 degrees of timing. That way, when the turbocharger swings up into a bunch of boost and the engine speed is really starting to build, the ignition timing's low and the horsepower will be down, allowing the tires to stay hooked up. One thing I did notice on that 720 run, and it had not happened to date, is the fuel pressure was low through second gear. And while the injectors covered the fuel delivery need in second gear, when it went into third gear, it couldn't. And my lean cut is at 0.85 lambda, and the car went as lean as 0.84 lambda. So it didn't lean cut, but for around 6 or 7/10 of a second, it was quite a bit leaner than I would have liked it to be. So I didn't really know what to think about that, but I knew I didn't have enough information to properly diagnose it. So I moved the lean cut down. We told Jason that we were going to go back up. He said, well, the track's not as good as it was an hour ago, because a couple hours had passed now. we went up there with what I felt to be a pretty aggressive amount of power in the car. You know, it definitely would have gone in the sixes, you know, and it just knocked the tires loose, and that was it. So we accepted our 720 run, and we're now going to move on to the next track.
So I showed up a little bit later than usual today because I know the track and I knew the prep, so I wasn't worried about that. But I had made the mistake of paying attention to the IATs. So with showing up later, that means the car has less time to cool down, and I didn't realize that until, or I didn't remember that until I had actually made it to the track, and I was starting to get really worried because the car was hot, and it doesn't like to be hot. So I'm playing the IAT game again. I'm watching the laptop, and the longer I sit there, the more and more disappointed I get because I'm realizing that I just shot myself in the foot by showing up late. Doesn't feel as fast as it was at ATCO, but I wasn't expecting it to be as fast. So I'm nervous as I roll up to the time shack to grab the slip, and luckily enough, the time slip said 11:01 at 127 miles an hour, just like it did at Cecil. I was happy about that, but at the same time, it wasn't the time that I wanted. I got right back in the lanes. I literally drove from the time shack right back into the lanes so that I could try to get that second run. And it feels the same as the first run. So I'm not expecting anything better. And I roll up to the time shack and it goes 11:04 at 127. So although I didn't get anything better on the second run, it solidified the fact that if the car's hot, it's gonna go 11:0.
So shortly after leaving Maryland, it was probably 20 miles away when the car was already behaving a little bit different. First of all, we left the track. It was one of the hottest days. In New Jersey, it was really nice. It was good weather. In Maryland, it was like 90 degrees. So it was the hottest day we had faced all week. I assumed the car would behave the same way it behaved all week, but again, it was a big difference in temperature in the middle of the day, lots of traffic. The car started getting hot. It didn't want to accelerate the way that it was accelerating before leaving lights.
I knew that that our week was likely over, but because Gio has such a high level of determination, I have to kind of break the news to him over some time so he can kind of process it. So I said, hey, you know, we got this problem. He said, well, can you make something happen and we'll just get back on the road? So I was going to give him that. And then the next time we stopped, I could be like, okay, now our problem is going to stop our drag week.
Jay did a thing where I know that there's something wrong, and I can see that he knows there's something wrong, but he knows I'm not ready to quit. Like, it was obvious. To me, it was just like a temperature problem. I'm like, hey, car's overheating. At that point, I was pacing the Supra, and the MK5 Supra, and Chris was just going slow. I was getting frustrated. I'm like, if we could just go a little bit faster and I get the car in power, I can make it. And, you know, he was letting me do all that, but he knew that the car was not happy. I hate to call it quits, but it was the right call. And luckily, we stopped at a place that was kind enough to let us parked the car in their lot, stored away, caged, and we were able to just, make the drive back to Virginia Motorsports. And the next morning, we had to tell everyone that we were out. It was extremely frustrating. We were so close to make it to the end. We made it 4 out of 5 days. That doesn't count. You don't get any points for 4 days. It only counts if you finish the week. So it doesn't matter what we did the other 4 days, because we didn't actually compete on day 5. We officially did not finish drag week, and we'll have to try this again next year.
So 9 o'clock rolls around and they open the gates and all the other racers start flooding in, and everybody's swapping their cars back into race mode, and I'm just sitting there smiling because my car's been set up and ready to race since 7 o'clock. I roll up to the lanes. I'm excited. I ran here before on Monday, and the car went 1097 at 130. All I got to do is repeat that run, and the car is exactly how it was on Monday. It's cold, it's ready, and I'm ready.
As we now have 6,800 people watching worldwide. Supra, this has run top 10. Basically a 216 blank with no windows in the back. And there you go, the Supra, 1094 at a big 130.87 miles an hour.
The 60-foot doesn't feel as fast as it did at Atco, but at the same time I can feel the car has the power as it's rolling through the gears, and as soon as it goes into 6th gear before the traps, like, I know it's a good run because that means it's gonna be 128, 129 miles an hour. So I roll up to the time shack and I'm nervous because this might be my only run for the day because they have other races that they have to do that day. So I'm nervous, but I'm excited because I know the car felt good. I wait until I get back to the pits and I finally flip the slip over and I'm looking at it, and I look at it incrementally so that, like, I'm delaying either my disappointment or my excitement. And I get down to the bottom and it's a 1094 at 130. And like, all of this weight is lifted off my shoulders. Like, we achieved the 10-second average, and it was an awesome feeling. As a racer, I was a little disappointed that it didn't go faster because it went 130 miles an hour again, but at the same time, I didn't need to run again. I had the 10-second average, and it's exactly what we hoped for.
Chris had finished his drag week with the MK5, and as the day was wrapping up, Tom Bailey was going to make another run. So I had been cleaning up, getting ready to go home. I was going to stay for the award ceremony, but my hands were dirty, so I was washing my hands. And I heard on the loudspeaker that that Tom Bailey was going to make another run. And the only reason that he would make another run that late in the day is to try to get his 5. So I kind of hurried out of the bathroom, and I remember as the burnout was already done, and I was walking to the fence, and there was a kid, a younger guy, and he was running to the fence. And he doesn't run often, but he was not going to miss this. So he kind of had his pants in one hand, and he was just, as fast as he could run, he was going to get to the fence and watch this happen. When the scoreboard lit up, what I picture, one of the coolest things about his car is these cup holders. So if you look up pictures of his car, he's got this Pro Mod, he's driving on the street, and it's got cup holders, which is, you kind of have to humor it, you know, because that's that man's machine, and he got his run. You know, it's the first in competition 5-second drag week car, which is a a huge feat. So congratulations to him. Also with Drag Week, you have to understand that it's an experience. You know, it's a big thing, and maybe you'll go your first year and maybe you'll win, or maybe you'll go for 10 years before you win. And it's kind of the same experience with Bonneville. If you go to the Salt Flats to race there, you can have a really good plan. This year I had a really good plan at Bonneville, and the weather got me, so I didn't get to go fast. I got to go out there and spin the tires at 200 miles an hour and try not to spin the car around. You know, it was not what I had planned. These types of big experiences they're big commitments. They're not going to be something that you click like on your phone and you get a little dopamine out of the internet. This is stuff that you have to get out there and immerse yourself in and accept that you may lose. You may lose a lot, and you could give up or you can keep going, and that's kind of the game. After coming home and taking the engine apart, there were two things that had clearly gone wrong. The first was the head gasket ring that I had tried didn't work as well as the one that I used to use, so I have to make another change there or go back to what I was accustomed to. The second thing is a valve seat had fallen out of the cylinder head. This could just be nothing more than fatigue. You have an engine that makes a tremendous amount of horsepower, and with that horsepower comes a lot of heat, and that heat can fatigue the aluminum, and it can loosen its grip on the valve seat, and the valve seat can fall out of the head. So this head, unfortunately, will now be retired, and we will have to get a new cylinder head for the car. And this is just part of racing. You're gonna consume a certain amount of parts when you're making this kind of power, and you just have to learn to deal with it. Not everything is easy. And as you ask so much out of these mechanical components, you will break things. And maybe you'll give up and buy a jet ski. I don't know. I'm not going to give up and buy a jet ski. I'll just fix the car, build more stuff, figure out how to make more power, figure out how to get it to hold more boost, figure out how to go faster. I mean, that's what I've done with my life. I mean, this is cars are my life. So going to Drag Week and going home broken, I mean, I got a lot of first round runner up in my Mustang, so I'm not afraid to lose a little bit.